Hello viewer, welcome to Take on Tech, a weekly program that brings you technological concepts and debates and explores them in ways that you can understand and engage with a panel of experts and ask questions. In today's program, we are going to be continuing with part 2 of last week's program, and we are looking at whether the big technological companies have become the global regulator. To allow us to engage with us, I take you over to Jane Wamboi to give us our social media handles. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Grace. A warm welcome once again to Take on Tech. My name is Jane Wamboi. As always, glad to have you with us right here on KBC Channel 1. Now, as aforementioned, today we're going to be talking about big tech and the whole aspect of regulation. Now, mind you, this discussion did start last week, and today we want to pick up from where we left. And, considering the fact that, the rise of big tech, on the other side of the divide, we have critics who have said that this big techs have what has been termed as an unorthodox business model in which they operate with. But we want to hear from you. We will be helping you better understand what we mean when you talk about big tech and the whole aspect of regulation. But we want to hear from you when it comes to big tech and the whole aspect of regulation. Do you think we need a super regulator who oversees regional borders when it comes to how big tech is operating? Or should it be a situation of where each country gets to manage its own technological innovations and advancement as and when they do show up? I would love to hear from you, so talk to us. Get onto Twitter. The hashtag is TakeOnTech. That is TakeOnTech. Your Take on Tech on Twitter. Our official station handle is at KBC Television. My handle is at Jane Wamboi, and my colleague on the other side of the studio, she is at Grace Givaiga on Twitter, and you can also send us an SMS. Our SMS number is 20154. Do leave a name and location. I will be back to sample your views and comments as we proceed on with the show. But for now, hand you over back to Grace Givaiga to continue with this discussion. Back to you, Grace.
Thank you, Jane. As we said, our topic, we are going on with part 2, is big tech the global regulator? Last week, we were looking at how innovation has continued in the world and in this country, and how it has moved from cryptocurrency to artificial intelligence, to Internet of Things, to machine learning, to mobile lending. And we were asking whether the stage is now set for a global regulator. And if that stage is set, what sort of a global regulator are we looking at? We then again were asking, do we have such a framework, or would we be thinking about such a framework? And to continue with the discussion, we have our panelists, an expert panel, and from my far end, the lady in blue, her name is Liz Orembo. Liz Orembo is from the Kenya ICT Action Network. She's an associate there. Followed by John Walubengo. John Walubengo is a blogger in one of our daily newspapers, but is also a lecturer at Multimedia University.
Thank you.
And is a techie. And then we have Janet Othero, who is a senior associate at OK Law, and is an advocate of the High Court.
Yes.
Karibuni sana.
Thank you so much.
To take us back, just to capture what we were discussing, and then to get us onto the debates today. Walubengo,
Yep.
who are these big tech for the benefit of those who may want to remind themselves of what we were discussing?
Okay. The big tech at the global level include Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, even Netflix is getting there. These companies that have a global reach, for example, Facebook has over 2 billion users spread across the world. So that makes it a big tech. So those are the type of companies we'll be discussing.
Correct. And Janet, please remind us what disruption is all about, and how it relates to the big tech.
So disruption is where there's been a normal way of doing business, a normal way of exchanging goods and services in the market, a normal way of how humans used to interact each other on a national and on a global level. So what has happened over the years, we've seen a lot of innovative solutions that have come to just kind of make it faster, make it easier, make it accessible to do certain transactions or obtain certain services and goods on digital platforms. So we are talking about the likes of the mobile money transfer systems that have made it easier to move money from one corner of the world to another without necessarily walking into a banking hall. We are talking about things like Netflix, like Walubengo said, without necessarily having to put your aerial on the roof of a house and to pay for cable on a monthly basis, but you pay one-off payment and you get a lot of content on your phone and on your laptop. We are talking about things like lending, where you don't need to walk into a bank with a title deed and have a credit check done on you. You just need to sign up on a certain app, and your credit history or credit worth is measured and you get a loan instantly. Then we are talking about things like transportation, where you had to have a motor vehicle or you had to be stationed within a particular locality to get access for transport, where now you can just get access from your mobile phone. So disruption is just the way in which the normal things that used to be done are not being done in the same way because of digital innovative solutions.
Thank you so much. Just linking to what Walubengo has said, the big tech, the big companies, and then the sort of disruption that is happening as a result of this big tech, and the disruption is happening all over. Liz, would you tell us what sort of market power this big tech wield?
It's very big, because let's first talk about at the individual level, how you use your phone, and when you look at the activities that you've done from morning to evening, you'll find that you've used certain apps for, let's say, 75% of the time. Take Google, for instance. You navigate with it, you wake up, you check your emails. If it's marketing you're trying to do, you do it through Google. What else do you do with your phone? If I tell you to visit my website, probably you'll forget, most likely. But where do you go? You go Google Kictanet, or you Google Liz Orembo. That's where you'll find my website. And when you talk about mass, how people access actually websites and these other big tech platforms, is through actually these three companies that people usually go to their site. Like when you tell your grandma that this is the internet, I'm giving it to you for you to use, probably the first thing she'll do with it is to go to Facebook or communicate through WhatsApp. If it's someone who wants to find things, of course they'll go through Google. So internet has become these three sites that people usually go to for their fast services. And if you want to translate it now to the physical world that we are in, now imagine everyone coming to Nairobi is poured in Machakos bus station. So that means the shops around Machakos bus station will get so much market and power before people start exploring other things. So they wield so much power in what they do, especially at individual level, because when you check everything you do, it boils down to the three apps.
Okay, now, if they wield so much power, should we be concerned? Should we be concerned about this big market power? Janet?
From a legal standpoint, I think it's an issue of concern, because in such industries it's called dominance, and dominance is not necessarily good, but it's not bad. The challenge we've had with the local telecommunication company is that they came out of the market fast and they innovated better than their competitors, and they stayed ahead of the competition, and because of that they were able to uptake a lot of the population in terms of the services they're offering. So because of this dominance that they created, they are actually something of a force to reckon with, because they've experienced downtimes or outages at times, and a good part of the population has been unable to transact or use their services. And it's quite a concern, because now then the regulators have to step in and find out what happened to have led to this downtime or outage. But also then, how do you deal when there is only one dominant or two dominant players in the market and they're both in the same sort of sector or space? Then do you regulate them on a constantly, or do you just allow them to thrive and innovate so that they provide better services and the competition is healthy between them because they're coming up with cheaper and innovative services for the public? I think it's an area of concern that should be looked at regulatory wise, policy wise, and also internally for the companies to look at themselves and see whether all this dominance in one entity is good for first and foremost members of the public as opposed to it being good for profits only.
Members of public, you mean here consumers?
Definitely.
What about from a moral perspective or from a non-legal perspective? What, I think Janet has talked about competition. Are there other ways that why we need to get concerned, or are there other reasons why we need to be concerned?
Definitely, especially from a data protection point of view, I think there's great need for concern because, like Liz said, the amount of information you put into these apps and these platforms that these entities provide is a lot. And we are talking about billions of people across the globe. And with this information, they get to do their whole machine learning and predictive analysis and basically profiling you as a user of their platform. And based on this, they're able to push to you the certain services or content that they want you to look at. But also they're able to sell this data to other third parties with or without your consent in the case of Cambridge Analytica, and you get certain information is pushed your way to kind of just elicit a response for you. So they have a moral obligation to us in terms of these data that they are collecting, but who now checks in terms of, are we checking them in terms of their policies and their strategies that they are fulfilling their moral obligation? I don't know if that's the same within the ICT space.
Yeah, I want to add the issue of should we be concerned? I think we should. And not in the sense of slowing down this big tech, but more in the sense of perhaps saving them from themselves. If you look at the issue of Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica, whatever Cambridge Analytica was doing on the Facebook platform, for a while they were not aware.
Sorry to cut you short, Walubengo, but would you break down what Cambridge Analytica is to a non-tech person?
Okay, so Facebook is a huge platform that has billions of users, and in the election in the 2016, I think, when they elected Trump, during that election, there was this company called Cambridge Analytica that sort of abused the Facebook platform because they got into the Facebook platform and harvested a lot of information about Americans. Close to 200 million American profiles were harvested off the Facebook platform without the Americans being aware. And so that data from Americans is supposed to be private, but this company harvested it and started mining it for political gain. So this company abused the Facebook platform. And we're saying that if there was some form of regulation to force Facebook systems to be sensitive to such possibilities, as well as to be reporting or demonstrating that their systems are safe, then people like Cambridge Analytica will not find it easy to abuse those platforms. So when you talk of regulations, it's not from the sense that I'm so successful and now you want to slow me down. It's more from the sense of you're holding very sensitive information about citizens. And the regulator is coming in to provide sort of third-party assurances that this data is safe with you. That's all. So that's a concern that should come out from the public good perspective.
now that you talk about Facebook, there was a complaint recently, and I think it relates to whether this big tech are the global regulators, or they are becoming the global regulators. And I think it was on Friday or on Saturday, I remember, this one person complained that her followers, she has over 3 million followers, had been sent an alert telling them that the lady had been sending them false information. And this big platform, which is Facebook, had warned her that they were going to cut her reach. Liz, what's your comment?
I think that was very wrong, because as much as the Facebook platform is privately owned, remember you also have a responsibility of putting people together. You're someone who does marketing on Facebook. Probably you've used money to advertise yourself for you to get those followers. And then Facebook one day comes to you and says, you are going to slash the number of followers. That means they've actually taken you to a loss. Because that is money that you had already spent, or even time to build your followers, because people don't follow you just
by luck.
out of the woods. You have to, you work for your content, you make sure you're authentic, you drag audience to come and follow your page. So that was really unfair of Facebook. And I think as much as Facebook tries to develop community standards with people, they should also take into consideration the moral obligations that they have. As well as the regulations that exist in certain jurisdictions.
Now, in last week, Janet, if you remember, I think one of you said that Google had discontinued some platforms, some fintech platforms, I think saying they didn't meet the standard. And now when you link it to what Facebook did, I am just wondering whether these platforms, and in relation to global regulation, whether they have that moral authority to actually determine this is not good for you, or this is not what is appropriate. Walubengo?
Content regulation is a very dangerous dicey maybe is the word I'm looking for, in the sense that what is morally acceptable in one region may not be acceptable in the other. For example, in Germany, it's the law you cannot trade in Hitler's, paraphernalia. But in US, you can find people selling Hitler's pipe, Hitler's boots. So you can imagine the challenges these platforms have, such that they have to respect different laws and cultures across the globe. So if you take Facebook, in Germany, they would be content regulating to ensure that Hitler's issues are not visible. While on the US consumers, they leave it open. So you find that these players have a challenge, and it's a big one. And from where I sit, what they should do is to respect the local regulations rather than dictate on their own. And I think in Kenya we had a case, for example, I think Governor Waiguru had an issue with Google. And she petitioned Google to pull down some content, but Google followed the Kenyan law in order to arrive at an answer. They did not sort of arbitrarily make a decision. That is giving yourself powers that you don't have. So I would say that this big tech should not, assume powers that they don't have and start doing content regulations, but instead they should respect the jurisdiction in which that event has occurred in order to make decisions.
Actually, that leads me to the next question, because I was actually going to ask who should regulate, and considering that these are big, big
Global
tech,
players,
who should regulate and provide. But I think Walubengo has given one aspect that there is need to respect the local regulators, which then raises the question: are local regulators ready, or are they positioned to regulate big tech?
Before she answers, maybe I could jump in. Are they ready? Probably not. I mean, look at Kenya, for example. Data protection bill has been in parliament for donkey years.
Yes.
So in terms of
Since
privacy
2004.
issues, even if communication authority pretended to regulate, they will be asked, you're regulating based on what?
That's exactly the point, because then you see it every day when people are taken to court over certain, or not even court, when lawyers are exchanging letters, when people are even just fighting on the social media itself, saying, I'll sue you for saying this, I'll take you to court for saying this. And then you look at some of the words that have been exchanged and the issues and the conflict arising, and you wonder, how do I package this and present it before a court and actually get a favorable order? Then once you package it and then you go back and look at the laws,
They're not
there.
They are not. So there's a gap.
If you look at some of these platforms, if you look at where they provide for places of dispute resolution, most of them provide for out of Kenya. Some of them, it's in islands somewhere else, it's in the Americas. You, a social media user, buying bundles worth 100 bob on a daily, if you have an issue with Facebook, will you afford an air flight ticket to go to America and dispute it in America? It's just like you said, when you come to a certain jurisdiction, try to conform as much as possible to the business practices and the legislation that are there to make it easier for us to enjoy your products and services.
Okay, but what about the case that Walubengo has given us? A global tech is sued, and then it becomes smart and decides that it's going to evade taking responsibility. So I think there was, what did Walubengo say? That there was that, it's not me, it's our company in San Francisco or in California, Now, in such a situation, what if we were to talk to CA, Communications Authority, what would meaningful regulation look like?
I think I would say as much as possible, try to adopt what is best practice. What's happening in Europe, what's happening in America, what's happening in UK. We are seeing a lot of movement in UK in terms of just data protection and penalties that entities are being given. In America as well, companies are being summoned to Senate and to Congress to just explain themselves with heavy penalties that are following. In Kenya, do we have the capacity to summon some of these CEOs sitting for these companies in locally and just summon them and tell them, come before Parliament and explain to us what you're doing in Kenya? Do you understand what is required of you when you're operating in Kenya? Don't quote the whole, the parent company and all that. So if they don't understand what they are doing in Kenya, then CA should now take action and tell them, then it's about time you got somebody, this is very controversial, but it's about time probably you got some help from local people who understand what the market is about, and I'll make it a regulatory compliance issue that I need to see on your board that there are Kenyan experts who are able to take the company through certain processes.
All right, before we go on, Jen, what's happening on social media?
So much is happening. The hashtag is Take on Tech. Let me just get straight to it. We have a Fred who is saying it is way past time that we held big tech accountable for the social costs others pay to maintain the business plans. The human cost is despicable. Super regulator is the way to go. Samuel here is saying we should be continually campaigning for transparency with big tech companies so that we know our data is safe and secure and not likely to be sold. The whole aspect of transparency with big tech is being brought up, and Fred is saying, super regulator all the way. All right, Thomas says Let me quickly get that. Thomas here says, no company should have this much market power uncontrolled. It is time to break up big tech and have a super regulator. All right. Remember, we asked you whether to have a super regulator in terms of having a regional or a continental regulator, or even global for that matter. That is what we mean by super regulator, or having local regulators come into play when it comes to regulating big techs. So far, 3 people supporting super regulators all the way. Let us quickly move on to, this is a tweet that was sent earlier on by Cyberspace, who was saying, big tech cannot dictate regulation. They can guide but not define regulations. A country's primary responsibility is to safeguard the interests of its population. All right. Kanyata here is saying, my take is we should have international regulatory bodies to regulate the big techs. So as you can see, there's this joint opinion and one voice in terms of having a super regulator come into play when you talk about this big techs. And maybe I could sample just one more still from Cyber, who is saying, we cannot have a one-fit-all regulation on big tech. All right. Some of these regulations may require an act of parliament, especially where user data is involved. And one last one still, they continue to say, regulation has always been a challenge when it comes to technological disruptions. We often are reactionary towards technology and thus cripple growth while at it. He goes on to say, we kill great innovations simply because we do not understand it and how to regulate it. Again, the whole question of civil education and awareness among the public,
Innovation.
and bringing out a very key aspect in terms of what we don't understand, we tend to kill. And in thus, so many tech innovations go down the drain as a result of not being understood and how to go about handling all this. So maybe our guests can be able to just let us know what you think about some of these opinions that we have received from our viewers. Keep talking to us. The hashtag is TakeOnTech. Back to you, Grace.
Is big tech the global regulator? You're watching Take on Tech, and we continue with the discussion. We want to thank all our Twitter followers, and I think let's pick it from one, Fred, I think he was called Fred, the question of a super regulator. What's your comments?
I would say let's be careful because I can't even imagine how what the super regulator would look like. Who would be the super regulator? Because if when you talk about international platform or a global super regulator, first of all, the international platform is so chaotic. The policy arenas are so chaotic. So you can't even say that a private company should be regulating, which government should be regulating this the platforms again. So it's kind of murky. You can't even determine who is going to be part of this super regulation and how they are going to be enforced. So probably, Gigi, what I would imagine would be that regions should harmonize their laws so that it's actually easier for Facebook to operate in, let's say, in Africa, rather than trying to fit into the 54 regulations. You see the way Europe has done with the GDPR. So it's a European law and then adapted in the member state. And it's actually easier to actually comply with the GDPRs as per the European Union, rather than trying to follow what Britain or France is doing. So maybe that could be a recommendation to us.
I want to support her in the sense that having one super regulator is going to be a challenge, simply because this big tech, for lack of a better word, are amorphous. At one time, they are telecommunication companies. At another time, they are content companies. They are financial companies. They are, they are
digital lenders.
they have so many characteristics that require different regulations
Exactly.
that you are unlikely to find in one entity. So rather than try to look for a super regulator, let's enhance the individual regulators. to be able to understand the digital aspect that is coming on board. And then once you have a strong content regulator, telecoms regulator, ICT regulator, fintech regulator, data protection regulator, make them strong, plus of course the competition regulator, make them strong in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in East Africa. Let's harmonize the laws. That way you end up controlling or managing this big tech on the global level. Yeah.
I think, and that ties up to what at cyberspace said on Twitter. They need to have several regulators, and in fact, at cyberspace emphasized on the need for data. Janet, can you comment on? I think it was at Kenyatta. This whole question of innovation, stifling innovation.
What we've seen in the post-millennium, early 2000s going forward, and even on a day-to-day, like Walubengo has said, these companies start out as one thing, then they get another idea, they onboard another innovator, there's a demand in the market for this, there's space in the market for this, and they jump into it. They see somebody who's doing something, they're interested, they buy them, they acquire them, then they just make it a massive thing. Well, it initially was meant to be something like on a community level, free of charge, but then big tech comes, acquires it and makes it to be something bigger. And the problem is this is happening on probably when you wake up. You sleep when it's one thing, and when you wake up, it's a different thing. Legislation in itself is a whole process. Before a bill is tabled in Parliament, before they understand what they're trying to regulate, what public interest they're trying to protect, then they move to Parliament and do the whole debate, then the President assents. This thing may have, the big tech may have dropped what it was you are going to legislate and is on to another thing, onto another thing. And it's probably not even doing it locally. It's probably even it has its subsidiaries doing it from other parts of the world, but being consumed locally. So innovation, as it is, regulation will never be at the same pace as innovation. That's the saddest truth. Innovation will always run ahead. And legislation will always crawl. And the chances are when legislation comes, even in terms of just industry guidelines, the product has developed and has morphed into something that cannot even be governed. So that's the challenge we face on a global level.
All right. We are about to close, so last word from Liz. Closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Big tech will always remain not always remain, but we need to be careful on how we want to regulate big techs, because at one point they've evolved to be a global good, or let's say products that really help the society, to a point that if you stifle the big tech, then you're also stifling the society or the societal growth. So we need to be careful on how we approach the regulation, and at the same time we need to balance it, because the way Janet says that you sleep tomorrow you wake up, the market has changed. So sometimes you have a business, let's say you're that person who had skis at you, and then you wake up the next day, Safaricom is doing skis at you to everyone, and you realize you don't have a business and you don't have means for a living. So at the same time we need to balance, so that as much as Google may want to enter into multiple of businesses, you actually control the market, so that there's actually something for someone there out there to benefit from.
Walubengo?
Yeah, for me, I would say that big tech should take the initiative to appraise, the regulators as well as the legislators on the things that they're doing and the potential risks, because you don't expect an MP to know what Facebook blockchain system is called Libra.
The currency.
You will not expect them to know the risks and benefits. So the big tech should take the initiative to appraise these people on what can happen and what is not possible, and then come to an agreement on how then the public interest or the public good can be protected. Because if they just run off on their own, yes, they'll operate for 3, 4, 5 years, but eventually Big Brother will catch up with them and may make drastic actions that then bring in the stifling of innovation. But if you are working together, moving together, you tend to create laws that are beneficial to the big tech as well as to the citizens.
For me, I think more and more personal information and privacy and data are becoming things that people never really used to think about, but are now thinking about them and actually thinking about them from a human rights point of view. And as they are slowly becoming integral in terms of rights every individual is guaranteed, then we really need to protect them at all costs. And like they've all said, collaboration, understanding, awareness is how we'll get towards achieving and ensuring that everybody in the ecosystem is protected. The big techs are still making their money, but the consumers are protected at the end of the day.
All right, Jane, I understand there are more questions coming up. Just to close the program with a few questions. Jane?
Yes, let me quickly, there's one that had just come in a minute ago in regards to the whole question of morality. Let me quickly see if I can get it. Yes, Cyber still asking, can technology and morality be mutually exclusive when we are on the big tech platforms? Maybe our guests can be able to answer that.
All right.
From a legal point of view, we always say what is immoral is not necessarily illegal. And
there's the gray area.
And what is probably illegal may not be necessarily immoral. So it's a balance. It's a balance. And we are all raised with different principles. We all subscribe to different religions. So what may be moral to you may not be moral to this atheist or to this person who subscribes to this religion. It's a balance, and that's why now we live in the communities we live in, different offerings, different opinions, different thoughts, putting them all out there and agreeing on a particular direction. But the thing is, you can't have big techs deciding what is moral and what is immoral. The only thing they can do is probably, if it's provided for legally, then that's where we will not cross, because it's in writing, it's illegal. But what is gray, then that's up to you opt in or you opt out. That's what I would say, because you can't be the community police.
Okay. Jen, do you have another question?
There's one here still in regards to big tech and how it can come into play. Just looking at the national development agenda and the whole aspect of the Big Four agenda, the health pillar has actually been mentioned. How can artificial intelligence help improve healthcare with these big techs backing it as they try to bring it into life?
Walubengo?
Okay. AI has a lot of use cases in the health sector, but I'll just pick one. The common one is about radiologists. These guys who look at your X-ray and determine whether you have one or the other disease. Those radiologists are not as many as we would have wanted them to be, such that patients from remote locations have to wait for long periods of time before they get their diagnosis back, because they send the X-rays to Nairobi. So what AI could do is to be able to assist in that particular task. So you'll have AI looking at thousands of X-rays and making diagnostic conclusions and reports, so that the doctors or the nurses in those remote places can begin to treat the patient. So you reduce the bulk of the work and be able to offer the service that would have otherwise been difficult.
Faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and it fastens the process and
exactly.
makes diagnosis easy. Do we have one last one, Jane?
Yes, and this one I just want to paraphrase it and use this image for that matter. And this is about, foreign big techs and how they come to our country, for example, and sort of swallow and take over and come as a wave and take over the local industry. And this is
the big techs, they come and
Because there's a way that somebody here just enjoying some local content on technology that is locally available, but yet this giant that is considered a big tech just comes in and sweeps. When it comes to just empowering and sort of having a base foundation, which still ensures that regulation, looking at the policies that, you know, our local innovations and tech advancements are actually given priority as opposed to when, you know, these big techs do come and take over. What more do you feel needs to be done to make sure that this doesn't actually become the reality on ground when you talk about local innovations?
Liz, yeah.
I think you can't stop, and as an innovator, you should look at the market trends, what people want. Like, you don't sleep. You keep on looking for that which people want and how you can improve your services. Because again, as she said, you sleep, the next morning you wake up, your business is no longer relevant. So, and it's also good because it also promotes innovation even between us.
You know what happened locally in 2015 when they introduced the New Companies Act? There is a provision, I don't know if it was sneaked in there or it was just there out of consensus, that they required foreign companies to have 30% local shareholding.
Right.
Of course, it was debated and eventually it was removed. So if we are moving in that direction of already saying that we won't put certain caps on foreign-owned businesses here, then I think even with innovation it will be hard.
Yeah. I had a contrary opinion. I support, well, I tend to agree with the Twitter comment that these big companies potentially stifle innovation. For example, let's take WhatsApp. So you're busy there innovating the next WhatsApp, and probably you succeed. And then you put it in the market at a certain price. But the original WhatsApp is free. So you're trying to sell your innovation in that space. There's nowhere you're going to sort of beat these fellas. So it is a reality. Where we may differ is how to resolve it. You can't, you don't resolve it by saying no WhatsApp in Kenya. That will not be the solution. Because Kenyans are already sort of hooked on WhatsApp.
Right.
They will find, you know,
Ways
VPNs and still access the WhatsApp.
Right.
So instead, we need to look for solutions that give a chance to our innovators, despite the reality that the big techs are actually here and perhaps eating their breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay. I personally liked that
The picture.
The picture. It actually reminded me when we were young and we would be told about this ogre that would come and eat everyone in the village and really get us scared at night. Jane, anything before we wind up?
That's that from this side of studio, but thank you. I'd just like to thank our viewers, you know, sharing with us your thoughts and opinions in regards to this matter. We absolutely appreciated you making time to be with us right here on Take on Tech. But be sure to join us again next week for another fantastic discussion all about technology here in Kenya and, of course, seeking your take. My name is Jane Wamboy, and that's that from this side of studio. Back to you, Grace, to just close it all up.
You've been watching Take on Tech. The topic has been, is big tech the global regulator? And we've just looked at what sort of innovations have taken place and what sort of laws have been happening and who has been pushing this. So it's been one interactive debate. This is a program that allows you to interact with a panel of experts. And today we had Janet Othero from Triple KO Law. We had John Walubengo, a lecturer at Multimedia University and a blogger in one of our local dailies. And Liz Orembo from Kenya ICT Action Network, KICTANET. She's an associate. And I want to thank you for making this very interactive. And I think we've had even with the big global tech companies and everyone who is innovating, there's actually the need to balance innovation with regulation. I am your host, Grace Githaiga. Goodbye.